The heat that day did not arrive so much as it settled, slow and heavy like a thing that had decided to stay. By noon, the ranch lay under it, pinned flat. The sky was bleached pale, stripped of color, and even the wind had given up. The cicadas were silent. The animals huddled in the thin scraps of shade as if movement itself cost too much. The rancher stood at the pump with his sleeves rolled up, forearms dark with dust and sweat. He worked the handle in a steady rhythm. Not because the work required it, but because stopping felt dangerous. The old iron pump complained with every pull, a tired groan that echoed too loudly in the stillness. Water splashed into the trough in short, precious bursts, barely enough to keep the surface from drying out again. He wiped his brow with the back of his wrist and squinted toward the horizon. Days like this made a man feel small. The land didn't threaten you outright. It simply waited to see how long you could last. That was when the light changed. At first he thought it was his eyes, strained by glare and heat. Then the shadow stretched across the yard, long, solid, unmistakably human. His hand froze on the pump handle. The shadow moved, and his pulse jumped hard against his ribs. He turned. She stood just beyond the fence line, tall enough that the posts barely reached her chest. For a moment his mind rejected the sight, scrambling for something familiar to compare her to. A man on horseback, maybe. A tree standing too close. But she shifted her weight, and the truth settled in. An Apache woman, and not an ordinary one. She was enormous, broad-shouldered, long-limbed, built like she belonged to the land rather than merely walking across it. Her buckskin clothes were dark with sweat, stained with travel and dust, clinging to a body shaped by endurance. Black hair hung loose down her back, heavy and dull with thirst. Her face was set, not hard, but controlled, as if whatever pain she carried had already been measured and accepted. The rancher's first instinct rose fast and sharp. His eyes flicked to the porch where the rifle leaned, close enough to reach in 3 steps. Stories pressed into his thoughts uninvited, whispered warnings, half-remembered tales of raids and blood and fire. Out here, fear was a tool. Ignore it, and it killed you. But she did not look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the pump, on the thin, shimmering line of water spilling into the trough. One massive hand rested against the fence post, fingers spread, steadying herself. Only then did he notice the faint tremor in her arm, the tightness around her mouth. "Water," she said. The word came out low and rough, scraped raw by thirst. It was not a command. It was not a plea shaped to soften him. It was simply fact, spoken aloud. The pump squeaked as a final trickle of water ran out. The sound seemed too loud, too exposed. The rancher swallowed. His own mouth was dry, but nothing like that. He studied her again, forcing himself to see details instead of stories. The cracks in her lips, the dust caked at her temples, the way she stood upright despite exhaustion, refusing to collapse even when her body begged for it. "You'll have to come closer," he said. His voice sounded thin to his own ears, but it didn't break. She hesitated. Just a breath of time, but enough for him to notice. Then she stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Each step felt weighed as if she were measuring not distance, but his intent. When she reached the gate, she stopped again, waiting. Not crossing without permission. Something inside him loosened. He opened the gate and nodded toward the pump. "There." She entered the yard. Up close, her size was even more startling, but so was her restraint. She moved carefully, as if aware of how threatening she could appear and unwilling to use it. There were old scars along her arms, thin white lines that spoke of fights survived, not sought. He worked the pump hard now, leaning his weight into it. The iron protested, then gave, and water burst out in a clear, steady stream. Relief washed through him at the sight of it. He grabbed the tin cup hanging from its nail, filled it, and held it out. His hand shook. She noticed. He saw it in the brief flicker of her eyes. The way her expression shifted, not with triumph or amusement, but with something quieter. She took the cup gently. Her fingers brushed his, warm and rough, careful in a way he had not expected. She drank deeply. Water spilled over the rim, running down her chin, darkening the leather at her chest. She did not rush, but she wasted nothing. When the cup emptied, she handed it back without a word. He filled it again, and again. With each drink, the tension eased from her shoulders. Her breathing slowed. Color returned to her face. Only when she seemed steady did she lower the cup and straighten. She looked at him then, really looked at him. "You did not fear me," she said. The truth came out before he could soften it. "I did, just didn't let it decide." That answer settled something between them. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, slow and deliberate. "I will remember this," she said. She turned and walked away, long strides carrying her back toward the shimmering horizon. She did not look back. When she vanished beyond the rise, the yard felt unnaturally quiet, as if something vast had passed through and taken its weight with it. The rancher stood there longer than he meant to, staring at the empty gate. The pump creaked softly behind him as water dripped into the trough. He told himself it was nothing, just water, just a choice made in heat and exhaustion. But unease followed him into the evening like a shadow that refused to fade. That night, sleep came in pieces. Dreams crowded his mind, hoofbeats rolling like distant thunder, voices carried on the wind, the feeling of being watched by something patient and immense. He woke before dawn, heart pounding, the silence outside too deep, too deliberate. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Many of them. He rose slowly, every muscle tight, and stepped onto the porch as the first pale light touched the land. They were everywhere. Warriors ringed his ranch in a wide, unbroken circle, mounted and on foot, still as the earth beneath them. Painted faces, rifles, spears, 300, maybe more. Enough to erase him and his ranch before the sun climbed any higher. At their center stood the woman he had given water to, waiting. And in that moment, he understood how small his act had been and how far it had traveled.